We need to talk.
What do we need to talk about?
I just need to talk about that you're in fancy pants and I'm in.
Yeah, we're like reversing roles today.
I know, it's great.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back. We got another week of awesome podcast goodness for you. You're tuning into the Loveumentary podcast, which is being broadcast on the Today's Mama Facebook page. I'm the host, Nate Bagley. This is my co-host, Kristin Hodson.
Hi.
She's a certified sex therapist, AASECT certified sex therapist, and licensed clinical social worker.
Right.
I got it right this time.
Yeah.
And today we switched roles. I'm dressed up and you're dressed down.
And let me just say that this is what it looks like when you're a mom of 3 and you're like making sandwiches in the morning, doing breakfast, and then coming to do a podcast. You do this.
This is your MO. This isn't how you show up to therapy.
This isn't how I show up with therapy. So let's just get that right out of the gate, that this isn't how I greet my clients. But on my not working days, I can tell you that I'm not dressing up. I'm like doing as little as possible.
It's a good podcast uniform. I like it.
I think so.
So I want to jump to it because I think we got a lot to talk about today. The last couple of weeks, we've talked about a lot of things pertaining to like how to have a great relationship, a great sexual relationship with a partner. We've talked about how to talk to your partner about sex, because that can be a difficult thing. We've talked about what happens to your libido after you have a baby and how that can be affected. We've talked about lube, which was a really interesting one. We've talked about foreplay, core play, and chore play. We've had a lot of really interesting conversations, but a conversation that I get a lot, or a question I get a lot, is like, how do you, all this advice is great, but how do you know when you need to talk to a sex therapist? Like, how do you know at what point in your relationship, like what struggles or at what point do you like need to go talk to somebody?
Well, and I want to say, yeah. And for a lot of people, when they think of sex therapy, even knowing what that is.
Therapy is one thing, but sex therapy, completely different level of thing.
And sometimes if you ever watch the show Fried Green Tomatoes, there is a scene where all these women are sitting in a circle with mirrors looking at their genitalia. And people are like, is that sex therapy? I'm like, nope, that's not. So let's bust some myths. Yeah, that's one of the first things I want to say is we're not ever looking at genitals in my office. You're
not like asking people to undress or do demos for you.
None of that.
What are some other common misconceptions that people wonder about?
That if they're having to see a sex therapist, they must be really, really broken. Like something must be really, really wrong, that we should know how. Like sex should just be coming easily. It's coming easy to everybody else. Why if we're struggling with it, that must mean something's really wrong. And the reality is, majority of us never got this education in school. It never happened at home. And so there's no reason why any of us should know. And sex therapy can just be a part of your, it can be a part of your relational maintenance, just like a car. Like you take your car in to get serviced, you're going to the dentist. This is no different.
Got it. So, can we just start at the top, like the easy questions?
Sure.
What kind of people do you see? What struggles are they experiencing?
So I should also say, sex therapy, while it's a specialization, there are sex therapists with their own specializations under that umbrella. So a lot of the work I do and a lot of the work the healing group does is we're dealing with maternal and reproductive health, sexual health, and couples. But so I'm working with a lot of people that are experiencing painful sex. They levels of and how to negotiate that. We're dealing with
high libido versus low libido.
Erectile dysfunction.
You get a lot of that.
Needing some basic sex ed. What else? I mean, the list is.
We've got painful sex. We've got like what if you have a dead bedroom,
so a sexless marriage. I see a lot of dealing with pornography, a lot around shame and sexual identity, body image, and there's intersections there where body image really impacts overall sexual experience and all of that.
Okay, so when people do come to see you, what's the experience that they have when they like come to your office?
So oftentimes people come in and they're surprised that they feel a lot more comfortable talking about really intimate personal things than they thought, because my goal and my job as a therapist is to make you feel comfortable and safe to share really personal and vulnerable things.
Got it.
So the very first thing we're doing is, like any kind of relationship, is just getting to know you. Who are you? What brought you here? And talking from there, and also identifying your goals. I'm a big believer of, as a therapist, there can also be an idea that I'm just going to drill down and identify all these broken spots. If something that we discuss doesn't feel broken to you, I'm not going to go there. We're going to really collaborate and identify the goals and what you want out of therapy and go down that path.
Got it.
Yeah.
So you customize your therapy to what your clients want.
It's very client-centered. Yes.
You're not going to like sit there and psychoanalyze them and tell them all the things that they're like.
If that's what they're wanting from therapy,
right,
we go there.
Right.
But the opposite side of that also is thinking that they're going to come in, say what their problem is, and then they're waiting for me to fix it and just give them a laundry list of advice.
Okay.
That's not therapy. That can be where you might want to hook up with an educator or a coach, where it's really solution focused. Like, here's the problem, here's some solutions, here's advice.
Okay, so what's the difference between a coach and a therapist then?
So a therapist, for me, the framework I look at is, this is potentially the presenting symptom. Oftentimes sex is a symptom of other issues, so let's look at all of those. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it is legitimately, we need some education around this, and that solves it. And so ask me about the Plicit model, which is a really important piece of sex therapy.
Okay.
So I'm going to go back and get a historical, holistic view of problems. A coach is going to be like, here's your problem. We've got 6 sessions. It's short-term, time limited approach, and is going to be much more future oriented. Therapy is back to forward. Mm-hmm.
Got it.
So I work a lot with educators and or coaches because people want a both and experience.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody today, and I asked them this question, what do you think happens in a sex therapist office? And he said, I don't really know, but I'm assuming they just give you a whole bunch of stuff that you need to go home and try out and see what works. And that's.
I had someone say, "Oh, you're a sex therapist, so are you just teaching people how to do it all day long?" And I'm like, no, it's not what I'm doing.
Maybe how to do it better.
Sure, improve quality.
You're not giving people a play-by-play. Okay, now this is where you put this, and no. What about who should people come with a partner?
They can or they can't.
Like, talk to me about the difference between whether somebody comes by themselves or they come with a partner.
That's really dependent. And sometimes I'll meet with someone as a couple and I'll say, I think you both would benefit from individual. Or I'll meet with someone. What
would be a case that would be like that?
Where maybe potentially there's a history of trauma, or there's issues individually that have never been dealt with. And so we need to get a handle on some of those individual. It's hard for me to pull individual issues right now, but it's hard to work as a couple when these individual things are really coming into play all the time. Or I'll work with an individual and they are in a relationship, and I'll say, have you thought about, or what are your thoughts on doing couples counseling? Totally. So it just depends.
Okay. Yeah. That makes sense.
But yeah, so there's that.
So you mentioned trauma. Mm-hmm. If somebody has experienced a lot of sexual trauma, or mm-hmm. has a lot of conflict around their sexual identity or their sexuality, maybe they just have a hard time tapping into their desire, which is another episode we talked about, is how to kind of tap into that and rekindle your desire. But if somebody's having a really hard time in their sex life managing that, how would you as a partner maybe talk to them about coming to see a therapist if it's something that they're reticent to talk about, resistant to talk about?
That's gross. That's the other thing I want to say is
now you need to show everybody what just happened.
No,
yeah.
I'm not. Back on track. I should put this here. Anyway.
Well, you got to throw that. She just pulled her gum off of her phone case.
Anyway.
Oh, gross.
It's not.
That was great. Okay.
I'm totally blushing. The biggest thing too is for someone to bring their partner to fix them. So
talk to me more about that.
Okay. So oftentimes there could be an issue within the relationship, and one person has identified that clearly the issue exists because the other person's the problem.
Right.
It's their fault. They're the cause of it.
It's my wife's
fault. They'll say, let's go to therapy so the therapist can tell you that you are in fact the problem, and I can get some validation that I'm right and you are wrong. and you need to be fixed.
Right.
That will
It's not going to go very far.
That's what the therapy is going to be sorting through that as well. But if you're genuinely coming from a place of, I'm a firm believer of it takes two people to dance. Mm-hmm. Like it may be a dysfunctional dance, but if you're contributing to that, there's two sides to
the relationship you have is the relationship that you've chosen.
Right. That's right. So
whether you like it or not.
And so that could sometimes be not speaking up because it's scary. It can be a byproduct of withholding. There's all sorts of things. But if someone approaches their partner and to say, you know what, I deeply love you, or I care about you, or I care about the relationship enough that I'm wondering if you'd be open to go see a therapist. And again, to go back to people saying, oh, things just must be really bad. As a therapist, I wish more people saw me before they were on their last ditch effort. Far too many people come into a therapist when they've done every single thing. Things are so terrible and they feel like before they get divorced, they should try therapy. And sometimes their hearts are already out of the relationship. Yeah. And therapy is just a formality to say, well, we tried everything.
So
therapy won't work in those instances often.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because it's already too far gone.
Right.
So my wife and I went to Seattle this last weekend, and we did the Gottman Institute 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work training. So we are now like the trained leaders. We can lead that program. And one of the things that they talked about during the training was John Gottman did a study, and they found that the average couple waits over 6 years before they actually go seek help with a problem that is really challenging their relationship.
Yeah.
So couples get into a pickle, they get into a situation where they're having lots of stress and conflict and they need help and they know they need help. And then they wait 6 years before they go and talk to somebody.
Because there's so much stigma and taboo around going to see a therapist, let alone a sex therapist.
Right.
And a lot of people are like, I'm not talking to another person about our sex life. Like, I'm not doing that. And there can be, and I empathize and get there's inherent vulnerability in talking about something so intimate and personal. And because it can feel shameful, like it can pull up all of these things. And that's, again, for some people, just talking about their sex life outwardly, not just thinking about it or talking about it with a stranger, feels new and feels different.
What are the outcomes that most people are typically looking for when they come see you?
Well, a lot of people want to fight less. About their sex life. They want to change the kind of sex they're having. They want to be having more sex. They want to get rid of a particular behavior. They want to deepen their intimacy. They want to explore their identity, whether it's gender or orientation. They want support in coming out. They want to heal their trauma. They want to understand what an aspect of their sexuality means. They want to learn how to communicate better with their partner. All of that.
What those are a lot of things.
Yeah.
What would you say on average is the length of time that people meet with you? So
you can have clients where honestly the number one question I get in my office is, am I normal? Is this normal? Are we normal? I have had clients that come in and they ask a question and they ask, am I normal? And we talk that through, and that's all they needed. So I have had certain sessions that are 1 or 2 sessions in length, all the way to some deep, long repair.
Right.
So it really varies on what the issue is, and that's where I work collaboratively with my client to say, what are the issues we want to work with? And here's from my experience how long I think it will take, but we're always checking in. Out of it. There are some people that feel like therapists just want to keep seeing you so they can make money.
Right.
That's not enjoyable for me to just do work that's not productive. My goal is to help people
never have to come see you again,
healthy and happy, and to be able to develop the skills and resilience to do their own thing.
Yeah.
So to work myself out of a job. That's what, if I just worked with people and they never ever got better, I wouldn't do my job. That wouldn't be satisfying for me at all.
Got it. I can understand how that wouldn't be satisfying, because you wouldn't see, I mean, what you want is your patients to feel better, right?
Yeah. I would feel like what I was doing wasn't working, and therefore what's the point?
Yeah, that makes sense. So somebody asked a question on Reddit. Would you ever treat somebody who was like a friend or a relative?
Great question. No.
Why?
I don't, because, and I will get that a lot where people will say, I know you, I'm really comfortable with you, I'd love to work with you. And if my relationship with them first was friend and or family, I cannot then be a therapist, because that's what's called a dual relationship, and I can't see them objectively.
Yeah.
And also they know our relationship is on the same peer type level or familial level, and that's not a therapy relationship. So I refer so that they have the same opportunity that I would want when I see a therapist, where it's a new person, they're just getting to know me, and that's the relationship we have, is just therapist-client relationship, no other ones to manage. Because can you imagine if in my office we're therapist-client, but then at family dinner we're just family?
Yeah, no, that wouldn't work very well.
That changes the dynamic.
I believe we call that boundaries.
Boundaries and dual relationships. Yep. That's a great question.
So here's another one. What if your relationship is rocky and you know you need some help, but you're terrified to come see a therapist because you're afraid the therapist is just going to say, you guys need to break up, this isn't going to work?
Right. That's another thing that I don't ever tell people what to do with their relationships, ever. And my belief is good therapy is helping people pick through and sort through things. Like I am pro relationship if it can work out.
Right.
That's where I am. But if I tell them what to do and they do that, and that was the wrong choice, it falls on me rather than them having ownership of their choice, whether it be to stay together or break up. So therapy is helping them sort through and come to a place that they feel not even confident, but they can have ownership in their decision, so that when times are hard, they can stand by it because it was their decision.
Yeah.
Not a third party that suggested they do it.
Right. And then they blame you for the decision if you did that. If there was ever any buyer's remorse or, breakup remorse, it would be like, oh, Kristin, it's her fault. She told us.
And I rarely actually, if ever, tell people what to do. We can talk suggestions, we can talk ideas, but at the end of the day, it's important that they choose what works for them.
Yeah.
I am not the expert in their life. I don't know them better than they know themselves. I can support and guide and help and challenge things, so they have to think through things differently and then ultimately decide what works best for them.
Love it. What is the difference between a regular therapist and a sex therapist?
I
should have asked this earlier on.
This is a good question, because at the end of the day, every therapist should be a sex therapist, because every single person that walks into their office is a sexual being and has a sexual story. Everybody. But right now, a lot of therapists have never had a single class in human sexuality.
Like when you say a lot of therapists have never had a class in human sexuality, are we talking like
exponentially high? Like
80% or
Probably.
50% or
Most
30%?
Programs, like a lot of programs, going to a class in human sexuality is optional. Even it's not even a required part of the program. I know in marriage and family therapy programs and some clinical,
there's like one or two maybe
there's
classes.
some classes, but by and large,
but if you're a licensed clinical social worker or a professional counselor, there's not a whole lot of curriculum based around sexuality. So for me to be an psychotherapist,
so every therapist should have a basic competency, but if you're dealing with the primary issue being sex, or the issues get more significant, referring to a sex therapist, because my training, it was like getting a second master's degree. As much time as I spent in getting my degree to become a therapist, I spent equally as much time becoming a sex therapist and doing a ton of work and learning the nuances and intricacies and complications and problems with sex. So the challenge with that, and this is where I like to educate consumers, is there's no title protection.
So anybody can call themselves a sex therapist.
Any therapist can say they're a sex therapist. And what I encourage people to do, because 75% of what makes therapy work is the relationship.
Right.
So there's
the relationship between the therapist and the client.
Yes. The trust they feel, and but I encourage people, if they're seeking out a sex therapist and they're finding someone that says they're a sex therapist, ask about their training. I get asked all the time, what's your training? What's your background? How do you view things? What's your approach? Totally normal and appropriate to ask. If they've only been to a weekend training, that's not enough time. I mean, I've had so much hours upon hundreds
and
of
hundreds
hours
of hours
and supervision. And again, you want to make sure that who you're meeting with when you're talking about these things, they're coming from an objective framework, not shooting off of their own experience. Because some people are like, I can be a sex therapist. I'm sex positive. I like sex. What's so hard about sex?
Well, you'll find out real quick.
Yes. So that's an important piece of it.
Got it. Another important, well, this is less of a question, but I think it would be prudent or really beneficial if you could share some anonymous, maybe success stories, some experiences that you've had where people have come to you under different conditions and figured out A, B, and C, and then left healed in a sense.
And I will always say that I'm highly, highly protective of my clients' confidentiality. So any success stories I share, I change everything so you could never identify who I'm working with.
That's a good precondition.
I want to make that clear, again, to preserve the safety of my clients, so I don't share their information. Success stories would be women who come in and feeling a total and utter disconnect with their desire, and it's a problem in their marriage, and starting to reconnect with their desire, even outside the bedroom. Just starting to be like, oh, I do have desire. I do have passion. How do I pull this desire and passion now into my bedroom? And feeling like demystifying that you either have desire or you don't, but that you can develop it, you can cultivate it, you can nurture it and grow into it. That's really exciting. And it's really exciting when women discover their bodies and they claim their sexuality and they start to feel like, oh my gosh, I am a sexual being.
Yeah. And it's awesome.
And it's awesome. And I learned how my desire style is different than my partner's, and I'm not broken. I'm good. That's a big success. Another success is couples who come in feeling like the chasm between their presenting issue, that they feel dramatically different. Let's talk about a sexual behavior. There's a specific name, not necessarily in your marriage, but a sexual act that people want to try, and they both feel really different. Like, I want to try.
Maybe it's oral sex for the first time.
Okay, I want to try oral sex.
Or maybe it's like a new position.
Yeah, new position. Where it's like, I really, really want to try this. And it's like, nope, I absolutely do not. My job as a therapist, and where this is really fun and exciting, is to teach them how to negotiate and to move them out of compromise. Of the only way that people will feel like they can get out of it is if one person surrenders.
Right. And
surrenders to what the other person wants, which builds resentment. What I help is see that there's many options and that they can bridge this. And there's not just either or.
Right.
There's not even just 3 options. Oftentimes they're 8 or 9 or 10, but to provide them the skills and the ways to think about it, to negotiate it, to we're like, this is doable.
I remember going to a bachelor party a few months ago, and we were talking to the soon-to-be groom. Mm-hmm. And it was a bunch of guys that were there, and we had the sex talk. We're just like, so, what's your plans for the honeymoon, blah, blah, blah. And the men started to talk to me about their sex lives, or tell this guy about their sex lives. Like, oh, don't expect your wife to do this, or, my wife won't do this at all. And I started looking at him, and I'm like, well, why? Mm-hmm. Well, she just doesn't want to. Well, have you had a conversation about it? Well, no. Don't really know how to bring it up at this point. Yep. And I'm like, oh, well, are you interested in it? Well, yeah, I would love this or this or this. And I'm like, okay, this to me is an opportunity to bring in some outside help, where if you're both kind of feeling stuck, mm-hmm. or if you want something and your partner's digging in their heels, mm-hmm. there's a reason. Yep. And you probably haven't had the conversation to really fully understand what's going on for them.
Yes.
And coming to a therapist's office could be like a great safe space and provide like a neutral ground to have absolutely. A difficult conversation.
And to bring up because oftentimes we're dealing with the issue in the same exact way. Yeah. Help create that safe space and to look at it in new ways.
Yeah, so. I love it. Well, any other success stories?
Got lots of success stories. That's why I love my job. I love having people come in feeling like what I'm going to share with you is going to be the worst thing you've ever heard. And you're a sex therapist, and I know it's going to be the worst thing. And sometimes clients have to build up to share it, and then they share it.
And they're like, we haven't had sex in 9 months.
Right.
Isn't that the worst thing you've ever heard?
I have done this or this or this. And my response is often neutral, and they're like, like waiting for my
the other shoe to
response. And
drop.
I'm like,
Yeah.
so what does that mean for you? And we talk it through, and they're like, they feel like the weight is off. And those are sometimes those one and done sessions where they just needed to say it because they've never said it out loud.
Right.
Like their worst fear. And they say it, and I don't come down on them being like, you're right, you're terrible.
Like, I cheated on my wife.
I hear that all the time.
Yeah.
I cheated on my husband. I hear it all the time. And that's the other great thing about, we didn't mention that in the things we treat.
Yeah.
That's a super common affair
What
repair.
about postpartum?
Totally. Postpartum
That's a part of
sex.
That's part of
Pregnancy and postpartum sex.
Yeah.
But affairs, for some people, feel like that's the end of the road. And for a lot of couples, that's the beginning. Like it cracks open the conversations that have been needing to be had. And people describe having way better relationships after the affair.
Yeah.
And that's what's exciting, is that so many of these issues, because it's culturally not talked about, we're not typically talking about it with our friends, is when people can talk it through, they can start to feel a lot of relief. They can start to feel like they're not broken. They can start to feel hope. And that's why people come, is those are the things they want. They're just not sure how to get there.
Got it.
And yeah.
We're running down on time, but any final tips or suggestions or
if
advice
you want,
for somebody?
if you're interested in going to a sex therapist,
Yeah.
I encourage you go to an organization called AASECT, which is spelled AASECT.org. That's where you can find a therapist. If they are on that list,
A sex therapist. Yeah.
if they are on that list, they are a certified sex therapist.
Which means they've gone through that extensive years of training.
It's not a weekend.
No.
It's the equivalent to a master's degree. That would be the first thing. If you're looking at psychology today, again, there's no title protection. Anyone can be a sex therapist. So just do your due diligence.
Yeah.
The other thing I'd say is give it a chance. You might be surprised that going and even having one session might be just the spark you need to move forward in your relationship or in a relationship with yourself.
Love it.
Yeah.
Can we do one quick recap?
Yeah.
So you treat all sorts of different people for all sorts of different things, anything that has to do with sexuality in the relationship, sex in your relationship.
And just sex in yourself.
And sex in yourself.
Yeah, I do. I mean, it's not just couples, it's just people as well.
So a good reason to come to you could be anything from, I just have questions. Nobody really taught me about my body, or I don't feel desire, or we haven't had sex in a while. I had an affair. We're trying to figure out how to navigate pornography in our relationship.
I'm not sure about my orientation.
I'm not sure about my orientation or gender. Okay, those are both great. So I feel like my sexual drive has changed because of something that's happened in my life. I've gone through a specific sexual trauma that has been really hard for me, and I need help dealing with it.
Painful sex.
Painful sex is
Desire.
a great one. Erectile dysfunction.
Yep.
All of these things are reasons to come see a sex therapist. And a sex therapist is not going to bring you into their office and open up the sex dungeon.
No.
And they're not going to sit there and ask you what positions you use, or
well, I may.
You may, but that's not going to be your first question.
No, and I'm not going to ask you to demonstrate it. That's the bigger key.
They're not going to give you, they're not going to require a play-by-play.
No.
And her job isn't to fix your problems. Her job is to help you fix your own problems.
Yep. And to bring to light and to bring ideas that you can solve. Yeah.
So don't be scared of sex therapists. I promise you, Kristin is really nice. She's really approachable.
I am.
And most sex therapists that I know they're really kind, compassionate people, and their goal is to help people have awesome sex and be comfortable in their sexuality. I think it's a scary thing, and I applaud people who have the courage to step up and say, I think we need a little help.
Yep.
So I hope this demystified a little bit of the fear and the worry behind what it's like to go to a sex therapist. We're actually sitting in, is this your office?
No, this is an office at my clinic. We should say we're at the Healing Group.
We're at the Healing Group, yeah.
My office is being used, so this is just an office.
It's really nice. They have treats when you walk in and nice music playing. You had the Star Wars soundtrack playing when I got here. I felt like you queued it up just for me, which was great.
We have our fish, Swim Shady.
Swim Shady.
Yeah.
If you guys have any questions that we didn't cover about what it's like to go see a sex therapist, feel free to email us or reach out to us. You can, in the show notes, you can see our information, and you can reach out and ask whatever you want.
As always, thank you so much to Today's Mama and this platform to be able to talk about and demystify sexual health and sex therapy. It's been amazing, and we've loved this audience.
It's been a lot of fun.
It's been an amazing audience, so thank you.
We're going to come back next week, Tuesday.
And it's endometriosis awareness month.
Endometriosis awareness month.
And it's amazing. 1 in 10 women are going to experience it between the ages of 15 and 49.
Sounds like something we should talk about then.
And so I bet a lot of women in today's mama community may be able to benefit from this conversation.
Awesome. I'm stoked to talk about it.
Okay. See you next week,
guys.
everybody. Bye.